This is a very interesting question. I think one thing that people need to understand is we're in the midst of, let's call it a demographic collapse. Like if you look at a chart that shows over centuries the global population growth, what you'll see is beginning really the beginning of the 20th century, so 120 years ago, massive spike in the global population growth, reaching about 2.1% I believe around 1960, and then a massive collapse in global population growth. And I'll relate to this to capitalism in a minute, but the total number of, outside of sub-Saharan Africa, the total number of children has essentially peaked and is going to decline. The total number of working age adults has essentially peaked and is going to decline. And you have country after country where you have a total fertility rate that's well below replacement. I mean, people think of, they obviously understand Japan, they understand China, Russia, Spain, Italy, Germany, all these countries, France, Canada, having a TFR that's below replacement rate. But what they may not understand is even India is essentially at replacement rate and is going down as well. So, and the reason I raise that is so much of what we think of as capitalism is based on a kind of overlapping generation model of growth and the accumulation of capital and growth in capital and return on capital. I mean, when I was doing my graduate work, I think it was Nobel Prize winner Tom Sargent taught an entire terms course just on overlapping growth models on that. So the reason is there are lots of other issues we discussed, but this issue is particularly interesting is what is the model for capitalism in a world of shrinking population? So there was an update done to the population projections that basically has done by the Lancet, so very reputable, and I think the UN will follow shortly, that just has after country after country after country a collapse in population over the rest of the century. So to me, that is a very interesting challenge to capitalism because so much of it is tied together in the concept of economic growth, and so much of economic growth is based on population growth. But we're already starting to see in Europe, the markets for everything are essentially shrinking in Europe. This is going to start to happen in China soon. It's been happening in Japan for a long time. So can capitalism survive in its present form? I think just because of the demographics alone, probably not. I think there's going to have to be a whole new thinking about economics. How do you do economics in a world where the population is at best stable and likely to be shrinking? What happens to asset values? What happens to real estate values? How do you create value in the kind of the finance sense? How do you accumulate assets? All of that, I think, is kind of new territory for that. And I suspect we're going to have to create a new type of economics over the next couple of decades to deal with that. And of course, I hope the new economics includes, well, it'll have to include thinking about the natural capital and the natural systems as well on that. And of course, we may come, it may sound like a great surprise right now, but we may come to the point in time where we actively think about how to increase the population, right? Because I mean, the latest projections, I said, have us peak 2 billion people lower than the current UN population, so peaking at about 9.7 billion in 2068 or so. So not that far away, and of course, all of our children are going to be middle-aged at that point on that. So I think that's a very interesting challenge to capitalism. But the other thing I would say is going back to the systems we talked about, the health system, education system, I do think, and particularly coming out of COVID, great financial crisis, now COVID-19, there's no avoiding the question of what the purpose of the economy is. And I think that as that question gets addressed, and there's going to be some answer around the well-being of people in the economy, then I think what's going to happen is the existing, let's call it capitalist doctrine, will be nuanced. So how do we use the market system? How do we use capital? How do we use finance in a way that helps us achieve that purpose? And so if we go back a little bit, I mean, the financialization certainly of the Western world, I mean, I think that there was there was definitely a naive belief that the finance system was kind of self-regulating, and that the finance system itself would contribute. In a capital system, you would allocate capital to the best use, and ultimately, society, economy, most people would end up better off. I think the great financial crisis showed us that that's not necessarily the case, and that there's elements of the capitalist system that are inherently unstable. There's asymmetries in reward systems. I mean, certainly if you're on Wall Street, if you can make a one-way bet with other people's money, that's a fantastic bet to take. So to the extent beyond the demographic issue, and to the extent the capitalism develops, I just think we'll become more nuanced on linking, as I said, the particular elements of how a system, whether it's the health system or the social system or the education system, work with what the objective is, and then which part that our traditional capitalist principles can support that with on that. So it won't be a scattershot approach where we say, capitalism is good, market forces are good. It'll be much more nuanced. So no, in this particular situation, what's going to work to help to achieve the objective of the economy? But all of this, as I said, is against the background of rapidly changing demographics. And I do think 2020 is a bit of a pivot point with this. I mean, we've obviously had excess deaths around the world, and I think we're going to come out of it really starting to grasp, we have a new economic challenge with the changing demographics.